My name is Sharon, and this here is my sister.
Tracy, pleased to meet you, yes.
Well, you can't mistake us, you see.
No, you see, I'm the pretty one.
What do you mean pretty? You're ugly, you are.
Oh.
You've got a face like a bulldog chewing a wasp. Oh, I've got the skin of a 16-year-old, by the way.
Well, give it back, you're stretching it.
Oh, how can you be so rude? Now, we're here to talk about pantomime.
Oh, pantomime, yes.
Yes.
Oh, and look, we're in our boudoir.
We are. Now, I'm going to show you some of my wonderful costumes that I've got
Yes,
here.
they're
Now,
the
this
big
is one of my
ones.
favourite. What do you mean, big? I've been on a very good diet.
What sort of diet?
I've been on that seafood diet.
Eh?
Every time I see food, I eat it.
Cinderella does almost always open with a description of Cinderella's beauty and of her position that she has just lost her mother. So the two things go together. But the entertainment business has done something, though, which has obscured the heart of the story. And that is that Cinderella always looks beautiful in the illustrations and in the films and is cast as a sort of pretty girl. Because what the stories are about is that she is pretty, but nobody sees it until the resolution of the story. Because after her mother's death, she becomes somebody who is overlooked. And she's overlooked, and she's, as it's in a sense, in disguise. Her name, Cinderella, in the Western tradition, has her covered in ashes and living like a slattern in the dust of the fire, in the hearth. And she is this ragged skivvy to the family, this kind of enslaved person who can't make herself visible, can't be seen and can't be well treated.
These are my lovely costumes. These are what I'm going to be wearing this year in Manchester at the Opera House, you see.
Oh, look. Bloomers. There, your bloomers. Look
They're
at
my
that.
bloomers.
Look at that. You could get baby elephant in there.
Oh, how could you be so rude? They're nice, they are. They've been personally fitted. Yeah.
Big spotty yellow bloomers.
Yes. What else have we got here?
Big-
Oh, this is nice.
Oh, yeah, bit of
This is-
simulated mink, that is.
That's very nice, that. Oh, I think it's still alive. Look. Get down. There, that's got it.
Other times it's a rushy coat. She just wears grass. She's like a sort of wild tramp. Sometimes she wears a wooden coat. She's just a kind of girl in a box. She sometimes wears, in a very famous set of Cinderella stories, she wears animal hides, and so she stinks. Another side of her being dirty and in disguise is that she's smelly, that she's foul.
What else have we got over? Oh, look at this. I do like a bit of glitz, don't you?
Oh, yeah, now that's for the boudoir scene. That's where we fit the slipper.
Yes.
Yes, because you've often got your foot in the slipper, haven't you?
Oh, I always get my foot in that slipper, you know. I don't know why I don't end up marrying the prince. I
Mind
really
you
don't.
could get your foot in the Crystal Palace, it wouldn't be a problem.
Could show.
Well,
You couldn't get yours on an iron bust cheek. There we go, look at that now. It all does that beautifully. And it's got feathers and sequins and everything you can think of. Much better than that nasty little thing Cinderella wears.
oh, well, I mean, a bit of old rag she wears. What more does she need?
What's true?
Yeah.
For
She's
her
a
job.
simple girl.
Yeah, she has simple needs, doesn't she?
Simple tastes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So in a sense, it's completely wrong to represent her as beautiful from the start. The story is about the discovery that she's beautiful, and that has a moral dimension. It's not necessarily physical. In fairy tales and indeed in mythology, the idea of beauty is almost always one of moral worth, and the physical stands for the inside, not for the outside. It's just a way of talking about the outside.
And next to my skin, of course, I wear my tights, you see. Now, usually I wear stripy tights, don't I?
Yes, very traditional stripy
Very
tights.
traditional stripy tights, and then, of course,
You
my
can
boots.
count the rings of the tights, a bit like with a tree, you know. You can tell
Don't
the
go
age.
into that, how dare
Yes.
you? Yes, I've usually got those on.
Stripy
and
tights.
Then I wear, of course, I do have to have a little assistance, because as you can see, I do have a fuller figure.
Fuller figure.
Yes.
Yes. You know, at one point, Greenpeace mistook you on the beach. They tried to drag you back into the sea.
Oh, it's not true. It
Well.
was a lie.
The first story that really inaugurates the whole Cinderella tradition in Europe is Charles Perrault's version from the end of the 17th century. And he explicitly says that Cinderella's sisters are just as lovely as she is, but they have vicious natures. So there's absolutely no sense in the early part of the tradition that they are physically ugly. And that's for the same reason that the story is really about inner worth. It's to do with recognition and what is rewarded. And the story is about goodness being rewarded. And when that goodness is rewarded, a certain radiance then takes over, and the person, Cinderella, is recognized for being truly beautiful, and the ugly sisters are recognised for being vicious. But that tradition changed with probably the problems of representations, of illustration, because after all, when Perrault wrote in the 17th century, and for quite a long time after, there was no illustration to these stories. But as soon as you get illustration, and then you get films, and the Disney film being the absolutely, prime example and hugely influential on the tradition, there, almost comically, in fact comically, Cinderella has lovely golden hair, and the ugly sisters have red hair and black hair, respectively.
What have we got in here? Oh, now these are nice. We wore these the other day in Manchester, didn't we? There we go. I should just pop this on my head. There we go, like this. You see, and I am instantly transformed into a thing of great beauty.
2.5 foot of black and white hair.
Yes, it's lovely.
I use that word loosely, hair.
Which isn't loose at all. I've had it sprayed to death. Look, you can't move a thing on there.
It's very nice. Well, what we've done for the endangered acrylic is nobody's business.
Oh, yes. You see, it was an endangered species.
It
when
was.
It came along,
Yes.
Yes, now they breed them like rabbits, don't they?
And we put the acrylic on our heads, 3-4 foot high, just to make you look a bit more subtle.
Well, I think it makes me look very glamorous myself, you see. You've got to attract attention to yourself. That's the trouble with the girls today, you see. They don't do enough to attract attention to themselves. I've seen them sitting there on the bus. Hair look like it's been dipped in a chip fat pan.
Yeah.
But no, you've got to have a bit of style, a bit of character.
Remember that Mrs. Thatcher? You see, she had hair like ours.
Oh, now she knew what to do with her hair. That woman, she was a woman.
Yeah,
she
you
was.
could go out in a forced 10 gale, wouldn't move, would it?
No, nothing moved with that woman. No. Cinderella's hair, of course, it's marvellous. We use her as a floor mop, you see, so it's very useful.
You just pop her upside down, isn't it?
Yes, we just wipe her up and down the floor like this. Of course, we call her Addis. Addis, come and do the floor, dear.
There is another opposition between the ugly sisters and Cinderella in the tradition, and it's a very interesting one, and that goes right back to the beginning, and that is that the ugly sisters are artificial. The ugly sisters adorn themselves. They practice cosmetics and wigs and corsets right from the start.
She actually calls it a harvest festival corset.
Yes, all is safely gathered in.
Yes.
Very
Yeah, corset, tights. Oh, and then your
Oh,
appendages.
Me appendages, me
Yes,
wherewithals.
yes.
I do like me wherewithals.
Unmentionables.
Yes, well they are now, yes.
Fortunately, you can hang them up at the end of the day.
Thank
but,
goodness, yes, it's lovely that.
Yeah, so that's your base, isn't it?
That's
dear?
me base,
Yes.
yes.
They pin up their clothes, they go to the ball in an elaborate masquerade. So the opposition between ugliness and beauty is between artifice and nature. They are, in a sense, cultural products. They are not truthful or authentic.
My makeup, how can I put this?
With a trowel.
Yes, basically, with a trowel.
Bit of polyfiller.
Bit of polyfiller, and I look so gorgeous
Yeah.
when I'm done up. When I am done up to the nines, as it's another classical saying.
It
that,
is,
isn't
yes,
it?
to the nines, theatrical.
Yeah, I look wonderful. I don't know why people don't fall over. Well, they do usually fall over when they see me, don't
She
they?
slaps it on with a trowel, and then I go over her with an electric sander just to give that sort of inner glow.
Bit of polish,
Yeah,
yes.
Cinderella, nothing on her face at all.
Not so much as a
No,
stick.
not a stick.
No, I don't understand it myself. Mind you, by the time we finish slapping her face, she's got nice red cheeks.
Yeah, imagine, I was just thinking today, what is that muck on your face?
That muck, that's cold cream.
Cold cream.
Yes, I use Pond's.
So do ducks.
Oh, you can be rude sometimes, you really can.
Whereas Cinderella, once her disguise is shed, once she no longer is covered in ashes or covered in rushes or hidden from view by being a skivvy in the cupboard or under the stairs, once she's revealed, she's natural. And that holds, you don't have Cinderellas who are using makeup and corsets the way the pantomime dame does when playing the ugly sisters.
Oh, yes, yes.
Never go to the ball without a crinoline.
Oh, no, mind you, that's get a bit drafty when you're in an upwind.
And of course then you've got your pannier.
Oh, I will be wearing my pannier when I'm in my coat. Now, the pannier is like a side thing. It sort of sticks out.
Very descriptive side thing.
A very descriptive
I
side
actually
thing.
happen to know it's from the French, pannier.
Oh, is it?
Meaning basket.
Don't you call me a
No,
basket.
no, but you've got
I've
baskets on your sides. That's
I
why it's
have
called a
not-
pannier.
Oh, I see.
Yes, crinoline pannier, French, you see.
Is that why you keep putting loads of bread in my pannier?
That's correct.
Oh, I wonder why
Pannier.
you
It
did
was
that.
used by the peasants to carry the bread, wasn't
I
it? So we call it a
see.
pannier.
Oh, I'm with you
Oh
now.
dear, no.
It's all very
She knows
exciting.
nothing. There's the crinoline. There's one of them. See, lots of 3/4 inch steel hoops here for the crinoline. And of course, 100 years ago, all the ladies used to wear these crinolines.
Well, of course, they
didn't
was made out of bamboo then, wasn't they?
Were they?
Yeah, it's not a steel crin, yes. They used to have bamboo ones, didn't they?
And then the pandas ate them, and now they have to be made out of
now they have to
steel.
be made
Yeah.
out of steel, yeah. So very
Pania. Yeah.
Stick that in there. Okay.
The ugly sisters played by dames are wonderfully complicated, and there's obviously a straightforward aping and mockery of femininity. There's the way that drag is satire of the female, and all that sort of Frederick Ashton and Robert Helpman wonderful messing about with high-heeled shoes and tights and corsets and wigs and false eyelashes and fluttering in the version for the Royal Ballet that was done almost half a century ago, I think now. And that clearly, in a very comic spirit and with very good humour, is a tremendous long sequence of mockery of the female.
Oh,
Masculinity? What could be masculine about
Mind
6'8"?
6'8", hairy chest and hairy legs. Well,
It's
I don't think
fashionable.
It's masculine at all.
Au
no.
naturel, another French word.
Au naturel.
Au naturel we is.
Yes, we is. Yes, we is. Very au
Yes.
naturel. Yeah,
That's
she does
Cinder-
French, you know, very well.
That's
Very
Cinderella. I mean, look at her. I mean, it's stick thin.
well.
Ooh.
No, not a hair on her body. what
No,
can you do?
dreadful.
None on her head, even.
No.
Or so.
But of course underneath it is something else, and that you see coming through in some of the feminist identification with the Ugly Sisters and with the pantomime dame. I mean, for example, in Angela Carter's work, the pantomime dame very much becomes an alter ego of the raunchy, unconventional, unruly woman, writer in this case, but simply, participant, the female human being who has the power to be comic at the expense of convention, so exaggerates and guises and overturns the actual canons and conventions of demure, meek femininity.
I have very petite feet. There's another French word for you, petite.
Petite, yeah. Oh,
Yes.
here's one of my dainty little shoes. As you
Lovely
can see,
there.
it's about
a size 10.
It's a size 10. It's about 2 foot high.
Yes.
In tasteful silver glitter.
Mm.
Yeah, and no, shoes are very important. We're the sort of Imelda Marcos of Manchester at the moment, aren't we?
Well, we are.
How many
yes.
pairs you got?
Well, I've got about 12, I think,
Yeah,
pairs of
I've
shoes.
got about 10
So,
pairs of
you
shoes.
know.
Yes.
Yes, and they're all different ones. Of course, my favourite ones, what I like to call my slapper boots.
Your slapper, oh yes.
Oh, they're very good, those. I use those on a Monday night at Essex when I go down the club, you see.
But you see, we as occasionally we do the boards of the thespian.
Oh, we do,
Do we not? Yes. And we always believe that the acting, it starts with the feet.
Oh,
innit?
it does, yes. As long as your feet's comfy.
Yeah.
So that you have this sort of scandalous feminine wiles and power of artifice and of play acting, masquerading, being a vamp, pulling both ways.
We're like your supermodels,
Yeah,
aren't we,
your
really?
Naomis.
Yes, and your chafers.
Yeah,
and
you are.
your chafers, well, I get terrible chaps. I don't know
Oh,
how
I
it
see what
goes.
you mean,
Yeah,
yes.
your Claudia Schafers and
yes.
your,
Yeah,
we're like them.
Schiffer.
Oh, do they?
Yes.
I thought they called her names
Yes.
like that.
Yeah, I'm more your Twiggy, you see. I'm
Yeah.
sort of svelte. I'm the sort who has to run around under a shower to get wet.
Yes.
Yes.
It's a shame, really.
That's a verse to my sister. We have to grease the sides of the doors to get her in and out.
It's not true. It's a lie. No, but I mean, we are basically clothes horses to the great haute couture houses of this country, aren't we?
Indeed, like Pound Stretcher.
Yes, I mean, we do a lovely job for Pound Stretcher.
Yes.
We really do, don't we?
Yeah.
Yes.
One of the things that I feel has been overlooked in looking at fairy tales has been their connection to the social and real emotional experiences of women, and particularly women in the past. And it sometimes feels a bit sad to kind of undo their magic and their enchantment, and in a way some of the more archetypal interpretations preserve that out of this world dimension of the fairy tale. But I think that the only way to explain this very, very deep vein of misogyny that runs through the tradition is to look at what actually happened to women in the past. And there are really two strands. I mean, but both of them concern money and survival. And Cinderella really is a story about money. Poor Cinderella has been disinherited, basically, and the emotional neglect that she suffers is also financial neglect. Now, with the case of the wicked stepmother, who, of course, is a figure not only in Cinderella but in many, many other fairy tales of Europe, and has remained absolutely preeminent in our imaginations, it seems to me that the rivalry between her children and Cinderella's depends on the precariousness of her position in the household.
The Baroness.
The Baroness, bless her. Now, she was a woman.
Yeah.
She was a woman, Baroness Thatcher. Oh, our mother.
Yeah.
She was a wonderful
You see, my father was a baron, and my grandfather was a baron.
Pity your mother wasn't. Now, well, the Baroness was marvellous. Now, you see, she had this wonderful philosophy in life.
What was that, dear?
It was a go-getcha philosophy.
Go-getcha?
Yes. Go and get it, she used to say. You go and get that for me, go and get that for me, go and get that. And, of course, you see, when she married, Baronardo.
And we passed that tradition on, haven't we? Because Cinderella, she goes and gets everything for us.
Yes, she's a go-getcha. Yes, she is.
Fetches
Yes.
everything.
Yes. Lazy girl, though, if you ask me.
Lazy.
Oh, she's always daydreaming, always in the forest talking to bleeding animals.
Yes.
I mean, she should be there kicking them and cooking them and, it's a disgrace, it really is.
One of the things that happens in Cinderella is that there's very often a figure of a fairy godmother, of course. And the fairy godmother usually is figured as some sort of old kind of crone who comes in as a beggar woman and asks for help. And Cinderella is the only one of the family who acts kindly towards her. And that's true in lots of other fairy tales as well. There are beggar women strewn about fairy tales who then turn out to have magic powers of enchantment. And I thought about this, and it seemed to me that in that figure of the beggar woman, fairy godmother, you can see the danger to old women surviving in early modern and medieval society. They were very, very vulnerable to being outcast, and to indeed turning as they, into being thought of as witches and being actually persecuted and even killed. And if you think that the story is possibly the story of the beggar woman, fairy godmother figure, you see how she is trying to communicate to children, to the hearers of the story, that the young girl who is kind to the beggar woman, the Cinderella figure, will be the one rewarded. That if you look after the old and the vulnerable, and particularly the old women, you may be the one whose virtue will be recognized and whose beauty will be finally seen. Whereas if you are the wicked, ugly sister who reviles and slams the door in the face of the beggar woman, she will not turn into a fairy godmother for you. These stories are pleas for kindness to those members of society, particularly old women, who have not been well treated and are not being well treated.
Subtle is the word with us,
I mean, 3/4 of a ton of ostrich feather.
Yeah.
About, a good smattering of sequins.
Oh, yes, at least.
Yeah, very tasteful, very colourful.
Yeah.
Mostly pinks, purples,
Green,
yellows, green, all together at the same time.
Yes.
Be bold, we say.
Yes.
Yes.
Bold and
bold,
subtle.
Yes.
Yes. They don't come bolder than her, I can tell you.
I think that it would be very interesting to perform a Cinderella with the Ugly Sisters beautiful too. Certainly the Rossini opera does do that, because then one would see that the tension is not between physical attractiveness, but lies between what approaches you have to the choices in your life.
We have big feathers at the end, don't we?
We have very big feathers.
Big feathers,
at the end.
yes.
Oh, yes. The bigger the better, you see, because we think, well, it's the last thing they're going to see of us, you see, so we might as well make a big, bold statement.
I remember reading somewhere in somebody saying that originally, way back, us pretty sisters
Yes.
were punished by having molten lead poured into our boots or something.
Well, in the old days, they used to do that, you see.
we
It
just
used
get
to
nice
be-
feathers and we get to walk on at the end of the show.
Yes,
isn't it?
well,
Yeah.
you see, I remember reading a little story about Cinderella where it said, oh, how she laughed as her sisters danced around the floor.
What, in these molten slippers?
In these molten
Oh,
lead
no,
slippers.
not anymore. No, we don't do that.
No.
No.
No,
bit
not
of
twice a
Gucci,
day.
bit of Armani, and we're off, really.
Yes, I know.
No.
But of course the Ugly Sisters cavortings are tremendous fun. I mean, really don't want to be to be a spoil sport on that score.
Mind you, I have noticed that she doesn't wear any foundation garment.
No foundations, no.
Nothing
Oh,
there.
natural again.
Nothing there to keep her in,
No.
is there?
Yeah, she'll regret it when
She
gravity
will.
kicks in.
I know.
Yes.
I know, it's a disgrace. I mean, look at you. Take yours off.